Peter in green with a time of 1930. Jonathan in red with a time of 2234. Austin in green with a time of 2230. Matt in red with a time of 2540. Jay in green with a time of 3838. Amy in red with a time of 2453. Chris in green with a time of 2856. Reed in red with a time of 2441. Ruth in green with a time of 3073. Robert in green with a time of 2536. Stuart in red with a time of 2793. Tom in red with a time of 2408. Peter in red with a time of 2346. Zachary in green with a time of 2470. Edward in red with a time of 2844. Sean in green with a time of 2693. Edward in red with a time of 2844. John in green with a time of 2316. And Doug in red with a time of 2470. Martin in red with a time of 3288. Jamie in green with a time of 2785. Randy in red with a time of 4717. Jamie in green with a time of 2:7:85. Brian in red with a time of 2:2:99. Robert in green with a time of 2:6:37. Megan in green with a time of 2:1:85. And Timothy in red with a time of 2:4:74. William in red with a time of 2:2:73. Brett in green with a time of 2:1:77. Scott in green with a time of 2:2:65. Dan in red with a time of 2:3:67. Whitney in red with a time of 2:2:48. Jennifer in green with a time of 2:3:68. Brendan in red with a time of 2:2:53. Chris in green with a time of 2:4:53. Dan in red with a time of 2:2:61. Nick in green with a time of 2:7:37. Merrick in red with a time of 2:2:75. Maddie in red with a time of 2:2:65. David in green with a time of 2:4:71. Jeffrey in red with a time of 2:4:57. Nathan in green with a time of 2:4:43. Paul in red with a time of 2:3:85. Richard in green with a time of 2:7:63. Paul in red with a time of 2:3:85. Philip in green with a time of 2:7:63. Lindsay in red with a time of 2:8:67. Nick in green with a time of 3:0:52. And Michael in green with a time of 2:2:92. Lindsay in red with a time of 2:8:67. Richard in red with a time of 3:0:67. Michael in green with a time of 2:2:92. And Matthew in green with a time of 2:780. Thomas in red with a time of 2:876. James in red with a time of 3:398. Brittany in green with a time of 3:644. Andrew in green with a time of 2:169. Chuck in red with a time of 2:368. Kevin in green with a time of 2:604. Bill in green with a time of 2:508. Devin in red with a time of 2:617. Vinny in red with a time of 2:451. Peter in green with a time of 3:453. Brian in red with a time of 3:024. Patrick in green with a time of 2:307. Frederick in red with a time of 2:282. Kayla in green with a time of 2:646. Aaron in red with a time of 3:556. Jay in red with a time of 2:279. Sean in green with a time of 2:302. Caroline in red with a time of 3:111. Barb in green with a time of 5:458. Peter in green with a time of 3:124. Jeffrey in red with a time of 3:138. Robert in green with a time of 3:302. And David in red with a time of 2:872. Scott in green with a time of 2:285. Bob in red with a time of 2:930. Scott in green with a time of 2:285. Mark in red with a time of 2:416. Michael in green with a time of 2:324. Sean in red with a time of 2:3:06. Allison in green with a time of 3:1:93. Liz in red with a time of 2:6:16. Tom in red with a time of 2:9:10. And Martin in green with a time of 3:2:91. Morgan in red with a time of 2:6:91. Timothy in green with a time of 2:7:95. Michael in red with a time of 2:7:05. Dave in green with a time of 2:8:06. Aaron in red with a time of 2:8:22. Trevor in red with a time of 2:1:62. And Barrett in green with a time of 2:2:99. Trevor in red with a time of 2:1:62. And Patrick in green with a time of 2:3:35. Jack in red with a time of 2:5:30. James in green with a time of 2:4:51. Jack in red with a time of 2:5:30. Kathy in green with a time of 3:2:68. Tim in red with a time of 2:9:37. Rodney in green with a time of 3:3:23. Jay in red with a time of 3:9:03. Dean in green with a time of 3:2:75. Haley in red with a time of 2:7:47. Molly in red with a time of 2:6:94. Betsy in green with a time of 3:2:14. Samuel in red with a time of 2:2:70. Jack in green with a time of 2:6:28. Samuel in red with a time of 2270. Jonathan in red with a time of 2654. Jonathan in red with a time of 2654. Megan Green with a time of 3075. Peggy in red with a time of 3572. Connor in green with a time of 2528. Daniel in red with a time of 2563. Connor in green with a time of 2528. Mike in green with a time of 2142. Libby in red with a time of 2882. Alan A. Green with a time of 3314. Moss 2 in green with a time of 1944. Peter in red with a time of 1971. Jonathan in green with a time of 2275. Austin in red with a time of 2412. And Tom in green with a time of 2501. Ruth in red with a time of 2903. Reed in green with a time of 2394. Ruth in red with a time of 2903. Amy in green with a time of 2:06.90. Chris in red with a time of 2:08.72. Robert in red with a time of 2:05.85. Amy in green with a time of 2:06.90. Robert in red with a time of 2:05.85. Stuart in green with a time of 2:08.09. Matthew in red with a time of 2:08.40. Thomas in green with a time of 2:08.64. Brittany in red with a time of 3:04.34. James in green with a time of 3:05.16. Zachary in red with a time of 2:04.52. Peter in green with a time of 2:03.26. John in red with a time of 2:03.14. Doug in green with a time of 2:04.87. Sean in red with a time of 2:08.19. Edward in green with a time of 2:07.63. Carolyn in green with a time of 3:03.07. Martin in green with a time of 3:04.73. Karen in red with a time of 3:03.51.